What if I told you someone close to you might not be who they seem? Imagine sharing your secrets, your joys, your home, only to discover they've been hiding a dark and ancient secret. This is the story of C.S. Lewis, not the man you think you know from history, but the 2025 version you've never heard about. The man who stumbled upon 5 unmistakable signs someone in his life was a witch. And here's the chilling part, you might know someone just like them. It all began when C.S. Lewis, renowned author and scholar, was invited to a secluded manor in the English countryside. The purpose? A literary retreat. The hosts? A peculiar couple, Edith and Gareth, well-read, charming, and far too curious about Lewis's writings on good and evil. At first, everything seemed normal until the small, unsettling moments began. A cryptic question here, a knowing smile there, and then the dream. That dream changed everything. It wasn't just a nightmare, it was a warning. And when Lewis began to observe the couple more closely, he uncovered 5 clear signs that turned his peaceful retreat into a terrifying battle of light and darkness. In the year 2025, the name C.S. Lewis might bring to mind the beloved author of the Chronicles of Narnia, a man of intellect, faith, and profound imagination. But what if I told you that a lost chapter of his story, one no one dared publish, holds secrets far more chilling than any tale of lions, witches, or wardrobes? Our story begins on a cold November evening, when Lewis accepted an invitation to a literary retreat hosted by Edith and Gareth Layton, an enigmatic couple known for their deep appreciation of his work. They claimed to be admirers, yet something about their invitation felt too insistent. At first glance, the manor seemed inviting, even picturesque. Ivy crawled up its weathered stone walls, and smoke curled lazily from the chimney. But Lewis couldn't shake a peculiar feeling, a nagging sense that he had stepped into something far older and darker than it appeared. Edith, smiling, said, "Mr. Lewis, what an honor to have you here. Gareth and I have been counting the days. We're such admirers of your insights into good and evil. You make it all so tangible." Her voice is warm, but her eyes linger just a second too long, as if studying him. Lewis shifts uncomfortably, forcing a polite smile. Lewis thanked her and stepped inside, but as he crossed the threshold, a peculiar sensation washed over him. A faint, almost electric tingle, as if the house itself were alive and aware of his presence. Gareth, with a sly grin, "Welcome, Mr. Lewis. We've prepared a room for you by the library. I thought you'd enjoy being close to inspiration." Dinner began pleasantly enough. The food was exquisite, and their conversation flowed with ease. But there were moments, small, fleeting moments, that unsettled Lewis. Edith said, "You know, Mr. Lewis, your writings suggest a profound understanding of the unseen. Tell me, do you believe all evil is external, or might some of it lie dormant within us, waiting to awaken?" Lewis hesitates, his fork pausing midair. He forces a chuckle. "A fascinating question, Mrs. Layton, but I'd argue that the greatest evil is the absence of good. Where light withdraws, darkness thrives." Edith smiles faintly, her eyes glinting in the candlelight. An interesting perspective, though I wonder, what happens when darkness chooses to stand beside the light, rather than hide from it? Gareth, Edith loves her riddles. Pay her no mind, Mr. Lewis. She enjoys testing the minds of the great. That night, Lewis had a dream, or perhaps it was something else. In the dream, he wandered the halls of the manor, but they had changed. The walls seemed to close in on him, and the air grew heavy, like a storm waiting to break. He turns a corner and sees Edith and Gareth standing in the library, their faces hidden in shadow. They speak in hushed tones, their voices merging into an eerie chant. He doesn't know, but he will. The light always draws them in, and we always snuff it out. Lewis tries to approach, but the floor beneath him gives way, and he falls into darkness. Lewis tumbles, surrounded by fleeting images. Symbols carved into wood, a crow with glowing eyes, and Edith's face, smiling eerily. He woke with a start, his heart pounding. The whispers from his dream seemed to linger in the air, faint but undeniable. As the day unfolded, Lewis began to notice things. Small things at first. A symbol here, a whisper there. It was as if the house itself was trying to communicate with him, warning him to leave. And then he found the first clue, a message hidden in plain sight. But who left it, and why? Little did Lewis know, this was only the beginning. The manor held secrets far darker than he could have imagined. And as he delved deeper, the line between friend and foe would blur, leaving him questioning not just the Laytons, but his very understanding of good and evil. The next night, sleep eluded Lewis. The strange sigil and the cryptic message, "Beware," clung to his mind like a shadow. Was it a warning, a threat, or perhaps something far more sinister? I must admit, your library is fascinating. I came across a parchment tucked in one of the books, a sigil with the word "Beware." Is there a story behind it? Edith sets her teacup down with deliberate slowness, her smile unfaltering. Oh, that old thing? Gareth has a fondness for collecting peculiar artifacts. Likely nothing more than a remnant from a bygone era. You mustn't let it trouble you. Gareth? Indeed, Mr. Lewis. These old houses hold many curiosities. But beware the power of imagination. It has a way of turning shadows into monsters. Their laughter fills the room, but it feels forced, unnatural. Lewis forces a polite smile, masking the unease growing in his chest. Later that day, Lewis wanders the halls of the manor, his curiosity gnawing at him. He finds himself back in the library, drawn to a large tapestry depicting an unsettling scene. A moonlit forest with shadowy figures standing in a circle. Something about the tapestry felt wrong. The figures in the scene, though unmoving, seemed alive, their eyes following him as he moved. Lewis examines the edges of the tapestry, noticing a faint draft emanating from behind it. He pulls it aside, revealing a narrow, hidden doorway. His heart pounds as he hesitates, then slowly turns the handle. Behind the door lay a staircase spiraling downward into darkness. The air was thick and cold, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and something metallic. Lewis lights a small oil lamp from a nearby table and descends cautiously. At the bottom of the stairs, Lewis enters a circular chamber. The floor is engraved with a massive sigil, and the walls are lined with shelves holding dusty tomes, jars of peculiar substances, and more sigils carved into wood and metal. The room felt ancient, alive with a lingering energy that made the hairs on Lewis's arms stand on end. He approaches one of the shelves, pulling down a heavy book bound in cracked leather. The pages are filled with handwritten notes, diagrams of symbols, and a name that catches his eye, Edith Layton. Lewis, whispering to himself, Edith, what is this? As Lewis flipped through the pages, the truth began to take shape. The Laytons weren't mere admirers of his work. They were something far more dangerous. Lewis, tell me, Edith, have you always lived in this manner? Edith pauses mid-sip, her eyes narrowing slightly before she smiles. Edith, why, yes, it's been in our family for generations. Why do you ask? Lewis, I've been exploring. Found a room beneath the library, a room filled with symbols and peculiar artifacts. Care to explain? The room falls silent, the warmth of the fireplace unable to dispel the growing tension. Gareth chuckles, breaking the stillness. Gareth, our little secret. It's nothing more than an old hobby, Mr. Lewis. A fascination with folklore and forgotten traditions. Surely a man of your intellect understands the value of preserving such things. Lewis, leaning forward, preservation or practice? Because what I found wasn't just folklore, it was instruction. Rituals. Your name, Edith, was written in the margins. Care to explain that? Edith's smile fades, her expression turning icy. She sets her fork down deliberately and meets his gaze head-on. Edith, Mr. Lewis, you see patterns where none exist. But if you insist on meddling where you don't belong, you may find answers you wish you hadn't. Gareth, let's not alarm our guest. Mr. Lewis, you've stumbled onto something old, yes, but harmless. I suggest you leave it be. That night, Lewis lies awake in bed, his mind replaying the cryptic words of his hosts. The house is silent, but a faint sound draws his attention. A soft tapping, like fingernails against glass. The sound was faint at first, almost imperceptible, but as it grew louder, it became impossible to ignore. Lewis rises, wrapping a robe around himself. He follows the sound to the window, where a crow sits, its glowing eyes fixed on him. As he approaches, the bird lets out a sharp caw and takes flight. But before he can return to bed, another sound stops him. A low, guttural whisper from the hallway. Leave before it's too late. Lewis steps into the hallway, the oil lamp in his hand casting long shadows. The whispers continue, leading him toward the library. The door is ajar, and inside, he finds Edith standing before the hidden doorway, her back to him. She didn't turn. She didn't move. She simply stood there, as if waiting for him. Lewis, nervously, Mrs. Layton, what are you doing here? Edith finally turns, her face eerily calm. Edith, I might ask you the same, Mr. Lewis, but I think we both know the answer. Edith steps forward, her shadow stretching unnaturally across the floor. The light from Lewis's lamp flickers as if struggling to remain lit. Edith, you've seen too much, Mr. Lewis, and now you must understand. This isn't a matter of choice, it's destiny. Some of us are born to illuminate, and others to obscure. She raises her hand, and for a moment, Lewis sees it, the mark. A faint, glowing sigil etched into her palm, identical to the one on the parchment. He stumbles backward, his lamp falling and shattering on the floor. The mark wasn't just a symbol. It was a declaration, a binding. Edith and Gareth weren't merely collectors of folklore. They were practitioners of something far darker. Lewis had uncovered a truth far more terrifying than he could have imagined. But the deeper he dug, the more dangerous his position became. For in the Layton manor, the line between guest and prey was razor thin. The clues had been there all along, hidden in whispers, glances, and unspoken gestures. But Lewis had ignored them, dismissed them, until it was almost too late. Sign 1. An aura of unnatural charm, Lewis. From the moment I met them, I felt drawn in. It wasn't just politeness. It was something deeper, something that pulled at the edges of my mind. Their charm wasn't natural. It was too perfect. Witches are said to possess an aura of allure, an unnatural charm that disarms suspicion and lulls their prey into trust. But beneath the facade lies their true intent, to ensnare. Sign 2. Obsession with ancient symbols. Lewis flips through the pages of his journal, landing on a sketch of the sigil he discovered in the hidden chamber beneath the library. Lewis. The symbols were everywhere, woven into the wallpaper, carved into the furniture, even etched into the silverware. At first, I thought it was decorative, but now I see. It was their language, their power. Symbols are the language of witches, conduits for their rituals and markers of their domain. To see them repeated is to step into their web. Sign 3. Whispering voices in empty spaces. At first, I thought it was the wind or the creak of the old house. But then, I heard my name clear as day. The whispers weren't random. They were calling me. The voices are echoes of incantations, remnants of spells cast long ago. To hear them is to be drawn closer to the witch's power and ultimately to your doom. Sign 4. Unexplained omens. The omens were everywhere. Dead birds, broken clocks, flickering candles. They seemed like coincidences, but together, they formed a pattern too deliberate to ignore. Witches are said to command omens, subtle signs of their influence. These warnings often precede their rituals, signaling that something unnatural is at work. Sign 5. A ritual binding. The sigil wasn't just a mark. It was alive. When I touched it, I felt bound, as if I had stepped into a trap. That's when I knew I was part of their ritual. Edith, calmly, you've been watching, haven't you, Mr. Lewis? You've seen the signs. Tell me, how did it feel, knowing you couldn't escape? Lewis clenches his fists, his voice trembling with anger. Lewis, you've been toying with me from the start. But why? Why bring me here? Gareth steps forward, his smile unnerving. Gareth, because you are the key, Mr. Lewis. Your knowledge, your insight, they will complete our work. The sigil on the floor glows brighter, the room trembling as Edith and Gareth begin their incantation. Lewis looks around desperately, his mind racing. Trapped and outnumbered, Lewis recalled the ancient texts. The only way to sever a witch's power is to break their circle. Lewis grabs a heavy candlestick and swings it at the nearest line of candles, breaking the circle. The glowing sigil sputters out, and Edith and Gareth scream in unison, their power severed. The room begins to collapse, and Lewis runs, the whispers turning into screams of rage. Lewis escapes the manor, standing in the cold night air. Flames engulf the house behind him as he clutches his journal tightly. The Laytons vanished that night, their fate unknown. But Lewis knew the truth. He had uncovered their secret, and he had survived. The ordeal was over, but Lewis knew that this was just one battle in a war that stretched back centuries. Witches, their symbols, their whispers, they weren't relics of ancient lore. They were real, cunning, and present, hiding in plain sight. You may think this is a story, an old man's imagination running wild, but I assure you it's not. The signs I've shared are real, and the danger, it's closer than you think. Let me teach you what I learned the hard way. These signs are not just warnings, they are a survival guide, a means to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your home from those who would use dark powers to ensnare you. Remember them well. An aura of unnatural charm. If someone's presence feels too good to be true, trust your instincts. Obsession with ancient symbols. Symbols are their tools of power. Recognize them and you'll recognize the danger. Whispering voices in empty spaces. These are not figments of your imagination but remnants of their rituals. Unexplained omens. Patterns in nature or objects that defy explanation are not coincidences. They are warnings. A ritual binding, to be part of their ritual is to be trapped. Break the circle, disrupt the spell, and reclaim your freedom. The enemy thrives in the shadows, in doubt and disbelief. They rely on your ignorance to work their plans unnoticed. But you have something far more powerful than they do. Knowledge, awareness, the ability to act. Learn to recognize the signs. Arm yourself with truth. Teach others to see what they cannot, and together we can expose their schemes. Now it's your turn. Take what you've learned today and put it into practice. Look around you. Pay attention to the small things, the odd moments, the whispers, the signs. Share this knowledge. Protect your family, your friends, your community, because one day you might be the only one standing between them and unimaginable darkness. And if you find yourself doubting, remember this. The greatest trick the enemy ever played was convincing the world they didn't exist. Don't fall for it. The signs are there, hidden in plain sight. All it takes is someone brave enough to notice and bold enough to act. Do you believe the signs are still around us? Have you ever encountered something you couldn't explain? Share your story in the comments and let's uncover the truth together. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that reveal the unseen world around us.